Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group located in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today, my friends, we've got some serious news to attend to. We're going to go to our mind map as usual to get our bearings straight and see what needs to be addressed today. But as you can see, we've got some pretty sort of late breaking news. The U.S. government prosecutors who are prosecuting Donald Trump, they came out, as many suspected, they are appealing the judge's special master order. We know that Judge Eileen Cannon came out and said, yeah, you know what, there's some really fishy business going on here. And maybe it would be good if we had a third party come and analyze some of this case, some of the involvement of all the parties here. And they did that. So the judge appointed this special master. And then suddenly, of course, the U.S. government prosecutors filed 3 different documents that we are going to take a look at today. One, a notice of appeal. Very short, very brief document, not a whole lot of meat and potatoes there. But then we'll have some actual things to read today. We've got a motion for a stay pending the appeal, right? So we all know that the appeal is going to take a long time. It's going to go up to the Court of Appeals, and they're going to brief this and brief that. But in the meantime, the prosecutors are like, we've got this whole trick-or-treat bag of goodies, and we want to start rummaging through it. And so they're saying, Judge, can you just put a pause on this special master stuff until we get a verdict from the Court of Appeals? And so we'll read through that. And then we have a declaration from one of the individuals who is a security expert, one of these people. And so he actually submitted a declaration saying that he is very concerned about national security, of course. So we'll go through all of that. Donald Trump is also facing sort of a new threat. At least that's what ABC News is reporting. They've got, another leaky person over from the Department of Justice saying that, yes, Donald Trump is also going to be facing some inquiries about the Save America PAC and, all sorts of fundraising efforts and blah, blah, blah. The lawfare continues. They will never let go. But then we'll take a quick look at another very interesting clip that popped out talking about Kari Lake, Arizona, shout out. And it involves Trump, one of these journalists who, used to sort of make a joke about Kari Lake. Oh, what is she, like a MAGA governor of Arizona, And suddenly they're saying, do you think you might be Trump's vice president if he asks? Do you think maybe yes or no? And so she had a very great response to that we'll run through in the first segment. Before we get into the news that many of us were keeping our eye on and have been keeping our eye on for quite some time. Obviously, we've been following Steve Bannon. We spent a lot of time talking about his first trial. We unpacked all of that. Awakened Speaker says, wasn't Bannon pardoned for this? I love your show. Well, I love you back, Awakened Speaker. I'm glad that you're here. Looks like you might have a YouTube channel, so maybe go check Awakened Speaker out. But, Bannon was pardoned for this at the federal level, but this is taking place at the state level, and the federal pardon doesn't apply to state level actions. And so he got re-indicted for this whole deal. And we'll take a look at all the things going on about this. We'll first of all check in with Bannon. He appeared in court today. I've got a couple clips. He had a couple things to say about that when he was walking into the courtroom. Politico gave us some background on the charges. We'll take a look. Money laundering, conspiracy, the usual things. And we'll take a look at these two yahoos. We've spent a lot of time talking about these two. Letitia, the tishiest of all the Tishy Jameses, is out here. And she's, remember her, the facial spasm, Letitia James. We have her highlight reel, but just, if you can't stick around for the full program, make sure you do not forget the Letitia James facial spasm tick. This is what, Donald Trump, illegitimate president. And the whole face is contorting like the emperor out of the dark side or something. It's strange. So we'll go take a look at the tishiest of all Tishies, the biggest Tishy out of New York that we all know, Letitia James. Well, we'll see what she had to say. And then Alvin Bragg, of course, is the newly elected a city prosecutor for New York. He had a statement about it. And then, of course, because it's New York and this is all about the media, all right, they walked him through the media. They walked him down this big corridor and they had all the press lined up like a bunch of vultures. And they were just sort of watching Bannon get perp-walked down there while they're all taking photographs. And, I was debating playing this, but I actually am going to play it. You know, Bannon says something about it, and I think that it's important that we see what is happening in this country. So, you know, the perp walk is kind of embarrassing. You know, it's something that they try to do to shame people, but I don't feel ashamed for Bannon or this stuff. I feel ashamed for the Department of Justice and these New York prosecutors, but we'll get there later, of course. And then in our last segment, we will take a look at this wild story. Now, we talked about this on our morning walk and talk, which is available for members over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com and members on YouTube, of course. But very strange story out of Las Vegas. There was this strange figure walking around a neighborhood dressed in this, you know, I don't know, fake landscaper attire. I don't really know what that is. A big, I guess, sombrero with gloves. I think, is he faking to be a landscaper? I don't know what he's doing. It turns out this was very probably, allegedly, a Democrat politician, guy by the name of Robert Tellis, who allegedly murdered this journalist, guy by the name of Jeffry Gurman, over in Las Vegas. Wild story. This reporter you see here on the right was writing all sorts of stories about this guy on the left, Robert Tellis, who's apparently this corrupt individual. And Jeffry Gurman ends up dead. And the investigation goes on and on. They find this guy walking around with this straw cap on. And then suddenly it just gets weird. SWAT teams show up. The guy gets escorted out of his property on a gurney, shows up in court. The whole thing is just wild story. So looks like Democratic politicians are taking out journalists. You know, they've been so upset and scared about all these MAGA right-wingers and these MAGA Republicans. And here you've got a Democrat who just decides to go murder a journalist. And well, we'll talk all about that. But woo, oh my goodness, you can see, my friends, we have to get to today. And of course, we are going to do that. And if you want to be a part of the program, the best place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. You can see the web address right there. And let's give some shout outs to see who's chatting away over there. Oh, what happened? I have to refresh my page over on that tab. Here's what we've got over there. Let's see if it loads. There it is. John McGarvey, JC the Music Man. We've got Cindy79's in the house. Miss Sin Lin is in the house, along with Tweak, shouting out Hillary, Salverin, and others are over at our community, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And when you join up over there, you get sort of morning walk and talks. You get an amazing, community of people who post stories and share all sorts of tips and all sorts of. It says YouTube is not receiving enough. Oh, what's going on with the stream here? All right, so it's an amazing community, and so come check us out, certainly, over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Also, you get many of those same features if you click the join button right next to the subscribe button, which is, of course, a YouTube membership platform. And if you join up over there, you get some good GIFs or GIFs, however you want to say it, that you can use in the chat. And I'm grateful wherever you decide to join and support the program. We also, of course, I'd like to remind you that I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group. That's the name of our law firm. We're located in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's a beautiful city, but we cover cases from all over the entire valley. Doesn't matter where it's at. Tucson, it could be Quartzsite, could be up in Seligman, doesn't matter where it's at. We help any good person, good people charged with crimes, find safety, clarity, and hope, not only in their cases, but beyond that, in their lives. We offer free case evaluations. We really appreciate your referrals. We love the work that we do, and your referrals keep us going. 480-787-0394 or online, rrlawaz.com is our homepage. And we've got an amazing team of people who love to help fight for justice everywhere we go. And so, all right, now let's get this queued up so we can get into the meat and potatoes of the program here today. And we're talking about Trump, of course. The Donald Trump prosecutors are unhappy with the judge's ruling, and they are, of course, appealing the special master order. They're saying, Judge, we don't want a third party to come in here and tell us how to run our investigation, and we don't need anybody to come tell us what documents should go back to Trump or what was confidential or not or what was privileged or not. They don't want any oversight. But the judge said, that's too bad. Now, we know that the prosecutors have the opportunity to appeal. Many people were speculating that they were going to do that. And of course, they did. So we'll take a quick look at 3 documents as part of our docket update on this saga before we take a look at some other issues, including a federal probe that Trump may be facing about Save America. And of course, some vice presidential speculation about Kari Lake. But big updates on the docket because we went through the special master order in detail. The judge said there were some hints of impropriety here, and at least the appearance of fairness was warranted, and that's why we need actual oversight over this entire process. And on this channel, we covered the meltdown. Everybody was very upset about this on the left. Wow, they're interfering with justice. And we had that Harvard law professor, Lawrence Tribe, come out and say that this ruling was the equivalent of Korematsu, which was the Japanese-American internment horror, and also the same sort of case type as Dred Scott, which is insane type of language from a Harvard law professor, or maybe that's what they teach you there, I don't know. But this was the decision heard round the leftosphere, and they decided that it cannot stand. So we're going to take a look at three things, and I want to give you some context on these three documents. The first is this notice of appeal. It's going to be very short, okay? It's a very tiny document because all it is a notice. Okay, they don't really have to file the full appeal. They can file a big, fat, hefty brief after all the research and all those, all the bells and whistles are added into their arguments much later. But right now, it's just going to be a short document. Now, that notice is a trigger for filing these other things, which are much more substantive. Okay, so simultaneously with the notice of appeal, we also get a motion for a stay pending the appeal. And what this is going to ask for, in summation, is to put a halt on all of the special master orders. Okay, if the special master says you can start doing these things, they're trying to revert that back. They're trying to say, no, you can't tell us to stop doing these things because the judge granted a stay. So let's take a look at several of these documents back to back. First, let's get rid of the notice of appeal. U.S. government prosecutors in a 3-page document filed a very simple notice of appeal. And as I mentioned, not much meat and potatoes to these things. There it is. We just got through the whole litany of it. So page 2 out of 3 is the signature document with the 2 attorneys representing the U.S. DOJ on there. The 3rd page is just a standard certificate of service. The notice of appeal. That's it. Notice is hereby given that the United States of America, defendant in the above captioned matter, appeals the United States Court of Appeal to the United States Court of Appeal for the 11th Circuit. What specific entry? Docket entry 64. Okay, that is the order for the special master that came out from Judge Eileen Cannon. And that's it. It's only a notice. Now they're going to file a big whopper appellate memorandum, brief and all this. It's going to be then submitted later on. And then that's what the 11th Circuit is going to be arguing over. And of course, that's going to be a whole separate saga on this special master thing. But that's going to take a long time. And while that is pending, the government prosecutors, they don't like the current order that they're living under. They want to continue to rummage through all of the additional documentation, all of Melania's brasiers and all of Barron's materials indefinitely. And this current order says that they can't do it. They've got to sort of put a bow on it until a later date. So now government prosecutors are asking the judge for a partial stay pending the appeal. They're saying, while we hash all of this out, whether, judge, your underlying opinions are legitimate or not, we think that there is enough basis that we should be able to rummage back through these boxes. 21-page Donald Trump versus the United States of America. And they say, all right, judge, pursuant to the rules, the United States, the government prosecutors are here moving for a partial stay pending the appeal of the special master. Specifically, they say, judge, it's a partial request here for a partial stay. We want a stay. We want you to reverse your order to the extent that the order, number one, enjoins the further review, so stops the further review and use for the criminal investigative purposes of records bearing classification markings that were recovered pursuant to the search warrant. So the judge said, stop your criminal investigation, stop rummaging through those documents pursuant to your investigation. They say, judge, please reverse your stopping that portion. Number two, require the government to disclose those classified records to a special master for review. They're also saying, judge, don't make us turn those over to anybody pending the appeal, which basically is gutting the entire original order, right? Those are sort of the two big things that the judge wants to stop. The government respectfully requests that the court rule on this motion promptly. We're very stressed out about these boxes sitting around that we can't rummage through. If the court does not grant a stay by Thursday, September 15th, the clock is ticking. The government intends to seek relief from the 11th Circuit, saying we're taking this up. Although the government respectfully, so meaning, right, they've already filed the notice of appeal. They're saying if this court, remember, these are two separate things that are happening. One is notifying the court that they're going to be appealing to the 11th Circuit. The other is asking the court to sort of reverse the original special master order pending that simultaneous thing. They're saying, Judge, if you don't give us a ruling on this issue, the stay, then we're also going to go to the 11th Circuit on that too. We're going to just go directly to them. And so this is the government prosecutors kind of giving her a deadline here. Hey, Judge, the clock is ticking, Eileen. They write, although the government respectfully disagrees with the court's injunction as to a much broader set of seized materials already in possession of the investigative team. And remember, they were arguing in their original motion, the prosecutors were saying, Judge, a special master is not necessary. It's superfluous. We've already looked at the documents. It's moot at this point. We've already tried everything on. It looks fabulous. So we don't need anybody to overview any of this. But they continue. They say, we respectfully disagree with you there. But it is not at this time seeking a stay as to the vast majority of those materials. They're trying to sort of separate out a big bucket of these, saying they just kind of are focusing on the confidential stuff. Prosecutors say, instead, Judge, this motion is limited to the order's directives with respect to the seized classified records footnote 1. Footnote 1 says, as discussed, Judge, a classification review of these materials was in progress at the time of this court's order, but it has not been completed. They're saying, we were going through all of this and cataloging all of it, but Judge, your special master order made us have to stop. For the ease of reference and because materials marked as classified and papers physically attached to them must be treated as classified until otherwise determined, this motion refers to records bearing classification markings as classified records. Oh my goodness. Ooh, this is spicy, my friends. Now, I don't know if you picked up on this. You probably did. This was the same judge, Eileen Cannon, who said when the government was making arguments in front of them during oral arguments on this motion, remember both Trump submitted the motion, the complaint, appointed special master, they objected, there were oral arguments over the whole thing. When the government was there and arguing in favor of not appointing the special master, right? They said, this is going to be dangerous to America. Nuclear bombs are going to explode everywhere if you do this. We're all going to die. And the judge said, okay, well, why? And they said, well, Judge, because the classified records that were found in Trump's office. And the judge said, up, hold on there, buddy boy prosecutor. Take it easy. Slow your roll here for a minute. The judge said to him, marked as classified. Remember, we talked about that on this program. We said marked as classified in one of the tweet threads. And now the prosecutors are responding. They're saying, yeah, we're not going to call it that, Judge. Right? We're not going to call it marked as classified. They give a little explanation. They say if it says classification markings, we're going to call them what we want to call them. We're going to call them classified records, not marked as classified. Ooh, this is spicy. And they are also saying, Judge, if you don't respond by September 15th, that you are going to hear from the 11th Circuit. These prosecutors, I don't know who they think they are, but they are really coming out swinging in this one. And they say, all right, so we agree that we're going to call these classified records, do you see? And so they're just going to kind of rub the judge's nose in this. Every time this comes up, classified records, even though the judge said during oral arguments, marked as classified. They know what they're doing here. This judge knows what they're doing too. Because those aspects of the order will cause the most immediate and serious harms to the government and the public, they say. The classified records, they call it a discrete set of just over 100 documents, have already been segregated from the other seized records and are being maintained separately. A stay as to that limited set of records is warranted for 3 reasons. Okay, so they're really only focused on 100 documents. These must be the nuclear codes that I guess are going to eviscerate the moon and the ocean and all of God's life everywhere. Whatever. Okay, so first they say 3 reasons, Judge, why you have to reverse yourself on the special master order. Number 1, they say the government is likely going to succeed in its appeal of the order as it applies to the classified records. Okay, so they're saying, Judge, you're going to lose anyways. So you might as well just give us what we want because you're going to lose. Sorry. They say, indeed, the government is likely to succeed even under the court's own reasoning, which is focused principally on the plaintiff's personal documents. Oh my goodness. Plaintiff does not and could not assert that he owns or has any possessory interest in classified records, that he has any right to have those government records returned to him, or that he can advance any plausible claims of attorney-client privilege as to those records that would bar the government from reviewing or using them. And although this court suggested that plaintiff might be able to assert executive privilege as to some of the seized records, Supreme Court precedent makes clear that any possible assertion of privilege that the plaintiff might attempt to make over the classified records would be overcome by the government's demonstrated specific need for that evidence. United States versus Nixon. Among other things, the classified records are the very subject of the government's ongoing investigation. Right? So they're saying, Judge, your standard is wrong, you're wrong, and you're going to lose on multiple cases. You're going to lose on this issue under your own interpretation and another interpretation. And we've already dissected largely this argument, saying that plaintiff does not or could not assert that he owns or has any possessory interest in classified records. And again, this is a category argument that they have been making for a long period of time, and everybody except them has sort of recognized that this is the issue in dispute. They call them classified. This word, they say it's classified. Trump says, no, they're not. They say these are presidential records. Trump says they're personal records. No, they're not. And this is the main point that the judge made in her order. She said, these types of conclusory statements are the subject. They are the key components. The main issue. Trump, even his lawyers were asserting those things. And so the prosecutors are now responding, and they're just telling the judge essentially no. Second, the government and the public, they say, would suffer irreparable harm absent a stay. All right? The government and the public would suffer irreparable harm if a special master comes in and the US DOJ can't get their dirty little mitts on 100 classified documents. Irreparable harm if there is a master appointed. They say, this court correctly recognized, that's nice of them to say that here, a government's vital interest in conducting a national security risk assessment of the possible unauthorized disclosure of the classified records and any harm that may have resulted. Thus, the court stated in its order that its order was not intended to impede the review by the DNI. Remember, the judge did say that. The judge did say, well, look, if you're already doing this Office of the Director of National Intelligence, they're already going through and combing through these records and doing their analysis. Well, we're going to let them do that. And the judge gave some reasoning, and they're pointing that out here. They write, but the review and the assessment on their own are not sufficient to address and to fully mitigate any national security risks presented. Because apparently these are the nuclear codes, as they keep telling us, or something. The intelligence community's review, writes the prosecutors, and the assessment cannot be readily segregated from the DOJ and the FBI activities in connection with the ongoing criminal investigation, and uncertainty regarding the bounds of this court's order and the implications of the FBI has caused the intelligence community, in consultation with the DOJ, to pause temporarily this critically important work. So they're rummaging through spreadsheets, right? They're assembling spreadsheets, and you got a bunch of FBI agents with donuts and coffee all over the place. And, they're all just sitting around rummaging through these invisible documents, apparently. And they're making spreadsheets, and they're trying to catalog it. And the ODNI is saying, well, it's another Time Magazine article. Oh, it's another Time Magazine article. And then they say, Judge, if you stop us from doing this, we're going to have to pause this. And the government and the public are irreparably injured when a criminal investigation of matters involving national security is enjoined. Okay, so just that fact. Do you understand this standard? These people are insane. That it just says when any, I guess this is their argument. The government and the public are irreparably injured when a criminal investigation of matters involving risk to national security is enjoined. Okay, so if the government can't do something involving national security, if it's enjoined, they don't, there's no limitation on this. I guess enjoined at all for any reason, anytime it harms the public. So there's no limitation on that. The national security apparatus, the intelligence community, they have no limit. They should be able to do whatever they want, because if there is a single sole limit, if they are enjoined, guess what? The government and the public are irreparably injured. Moreover, brilliant, outstanding. Third, they say the partial stay sought here would impose no cognizable harm on the plaintiff, right? In other words, if they're saying Trump wouldn't be injured here. Trump would just be in the same position. Okay, you're going to keep these 100 confidential records from him, and he's not going to have to see these things. What is in these records that they really don't want him to see or know anything about? I don't know. It would not disturb the special master's review of any other records, including any personal materials or records potentially subject to attorney-client privilege. So they're saying Trump really has no claim to them, and he shouldn't be able to get those back. And even the special master shouldn't be able to get those 100 documents. The government has already reviewed the records, and the court's order contemplates that it may continue to do so for certain national security purposes. A stay would simply allow the government to continue to review and use the same records, which again indisputably belong to the government, not the plaintiff. That's not indisputable. These people are so ridiculous. The judge said that, right? This is part of the debate. Are they personal records or presidential records? Are they classified or not classified? And those were the assertions. Are they covered by, executive privilege? Who knows? The judge said, yeah, it could be. And again, in the United States, you have the presumption of innocence. You have precedent that you follow. You have a cadence back and forth of open dialogue between the two parties, NARA, the DOJ, the FBI, and the Trump people, before precedent was shattered all over the place and this entire litany began. So the judge is saying not only were there, first of all, there are leaks all over the place. There are problems. We went through this in detail, I think, yesterday. But the technical dispute is about the classification and the categorization of these documents. And again, they're saying it indisputably belongs to the government. And that's the judge's disagreement there. So they give us a little bit of procedural background. Of course, they tell us the basics here. On August 8th, the government executed a search warrant at Trump's property. They say they contained 100 classified documents, including some top secret records and so on. 2 weeks later, plaintiff initiated this proceeding, saying they wanted a special master. The court ordered that approved at docket entry 64. They asked us to submit a list of all of the special masters that we think are good candidates, and we are working through that. But again, they laid out for us the three big components, and I want to just fly through these because we've already talked largely about all of them. But they say, number one, the government is likely to succeed on the merits. So the big component here is that they're saying, Judge, you're going to lose your order. You're going to lose this. You're going to lose this no matter what happens. Saying, Judge, you don't have this type of jurisdiction, right? You don't have equitable jurisdiction to issue an injunction to stop us from doing this, that, or the other thing. And they go through all the factors about equitable jurisdiction, and it's sort of heavy lifting legally, so we'll just kind of skid through that. They go through all the four factors, and they say, in conclusion, Judge, Trump failed to establish that this court had jurisdiction to do anything with these classified records. They also say they erred by specifically enjoining the review of the classified records. So, this was another problem that they say the judge screwed up on, saying that when the judge was referencing that old Nixon case, she kind of got that precedent wrong. The court observed that the Supreme Court has not decided whether a former president may prevent disclosure and that there were open issues there. But, they've got different interpretations of all this. They say the court appeared to recognize a sufficient showing of the need, and there's other reasons independent of Nixon that justify the non-appointment of a special master, or the declination of appointing a special master. And then we get to the next big paragraph. So the first main section was about jurisdiction. Then we see paragraph 2 or section 2 says, without a stay, the government will suffer irreparable harm. Everything's going to be destroyed irreparably. In recognition of the vital importance of assessing damage to our national security, the prosecutors write that the court specifically authorized the DNI to look through this stuff, and they are doing that. To begin, they say the FBI itself is part of the intelligence community. And since 9/11, oh great, the FBI has integrated its intelligence and law enforcement into its national security mission. The FBI does a lot of great work, they say. They're, investigating Lego sets and Capitol insurrectionists and, they say that the same personnel from the FBI involved in the criminal investigation were coordinating with the IC in its review, and that this injunction, Judge, if you tell us by appointing this special master that we have to stop any of this stuff. They say it would frustrate the government's ability to conduct an effective risk assessment and a classification review, and it could preclude the government from taking necessary remedial steps in light of that review, and we might all get blown to smithereens, risking irreparable harm to our nation and our national security intelligence interests. They say the government will also suffer irreparable harm if it cannot use and review those documents as part of its criminal investigation, and if it's forced to disclose those materials outside the executive branch over to Donald Trump. All right, so you see sort of where this is going. Then we get subsection A, where they're going to give us the details on that main section. And let's see how they close this out. If there's any main sections, nope, we go right down to the conclusion. And after all of that, sort of legalese, saying the government's going to be harmed and you don't have jurisdiction, they write, the court should issue an immediate order staying its September 5th order pending appeal to the extent that the order enjoins the further use for the investigative purposes. Okay, so you can't use these documents for criminal investigation of Trump. And number two, you don't have to, they want the court to tell the prosecutors, you don't have to disclose those classified records to a special master. Two things. Continue looking through the documents and hang on to the documents so that they don't go over to the special master. They say, counsel for the United States has conferred with counsel for Trump, and Trump opposes the government's motion, right? This is sort of a courtesy explanation that they attached here at the end. Sometimes you'll do that. You'll say, Judge, we've conferred with opposing counsel, and counsel has no objection to this motion. And so you just put that in there, and the judge sort of knows that, and then they can rule on it and kind of move forward. But here, obviously, Trump's people are going to object to this hard because it sort of guts the entire basis of the special master appointment. And the judge has already appointed a special master. And this motion was pretty condescending to this judge. It's like, hey, stupid, dumb judge, you're going to lose this on appeal anyway, whether you think about it your way or our way. You're going to lose it both counts. And you have no jurisdiction. And everything that you basically wrote in there is inaccurate because we interpret Nixon differently than you. And Trump's going to go, away. And also, irreparable harm. If you don't grant it, we're all going to die. So we'll see what Trump's team comes up with in response, but they're going to have some time to do that. I'm certain of it. Now, accompanying the notice of appeal and the motion for a stay, there was also this interesting declaration that was attached on the back of the last motion for a stay, right? And this is somebody who is over at the counterintelligence division over at the FBI. It's a declaration from a guy named Allen. And he's submitting this, right? The prosecutors are saying, Judge, we're all literally going to explode to death. Our eyeballs are going to melt out of their sockets. And so we're going to have the FBI agent who's going to support that. He's going to say, it's true. Look at my document. He says, dear Judge, I am assistant director of the FBI at some agency somewhere, some division, so and so. I oversee efforts to deter and neutralize foreign intelligence threats, national security operations of China, Russia, global Iran, and mission centers, and the division is responsible for all investigations involving the mishandling of classified or national defense information. As the assistant director of the counterintelligence division, I am responsible for other things intelligence. And I've got a lot of responsibilities, and I write declarations for courts. The matters here are based on my personal knowledge, and my personal conclusions are herein. I submit this declaration in support of the government's motion for a partial stay. I also don't want the special master to come in and stop us from doing what we need to do. He writes, this matter relates to the FBI's execution of a search warrant at the premises of Trump, based on a finding of probable cause for a couple different issues: obstruction, concealment, national defense information retention, and so on. He says, during the search, FBI seized 33 boxes, containers, and other things, some including top secret documents. Trump initiated proceedings, and then we got a big problem. We got an injunction barring the government's review of the seized materials. Oh, man, FBI agent, he says, oh gosh, man, on September 5th, the court issued an order authorizing a special counsel master to come in here and tell us what to do. Agent says, I understand that the government's motion this declaration seeks a stay that does the following things we already discussed. Allow us to continue to rummage through the documents and not give those documents over to the special master. FBI agent says, Judge, this declaration specifically addresses the irreparable harm to national security that would happen if you don't do those things. Number one, the intelligence community's classification review and the national security risk assessment are inextricably linked with the criminal investigation. Okay, we can't untangle these two things. They are coupled together, and we have to make our classification spreadsheets. We have to say Time Magazine, April 2017, not nuclear weapons, not going to blow us up. Okay, next row. And they just document the whole thing. And he's saying, well, what could happen here is we could find nuclear codes transferred over to Pooty Poo, and we're all going to die in a heartbeat, any minute now. And they say if we can't do our national security risk assessment and our classification review, well, we're all going to die. But also, those things are necessary for the criminal investigation because they're sort of parallel. We have to sort of classify the documents if we want to bring criminal charges. And so it's kind of the same thing. So we can't uncommingle the two. FBI special agent, he says, Judge, as I previously explained, the Counterintelligence Division, for which I am the responsible executive, conducts the FBI investigations involving the mishandling of these types of materials. Such investigations fundamentally require the FBI to understand the nature of the information at issue, including its proper classification, like what column it goes in. Thus, the FBI must conduct an assessment of the relevant information, including by obtaining a classification review. As part of this review, an original classification authority is asked to determine whether the documents bearing the classification markings are in fact properly classified. Whether the, spreadsheet is nice and pretty. In this matter, FBI agent says to effectuate the intelligence community's classification review, the FBI must be able to access the evidence, duplicate it, discern the appropriate intelligence community agency or agencies to which it should be provided, deliver copies and give them over to the agencies. And given the breadth of the document seized, thousands of documents, most of which were not classified or concernable at all, they said everything that we seized, because their search warrant was so egregiously overbroad that they got passports and other things that were totally privileged, as they've even acknowledged. Given the breadth of the documents that we seized, since you took everything, he says, the number of the relevant departments and agencies with those documents agreed to oversee and help coordinate with the classification review. Such review, as noted, is going to enable the government to assess the potential harms to national security resulting from these documents. At the same time, it's also going to inform the FBI's criminal investigation, and so we can't unmingle the two. The connection, writes this special agent, between national security and criminal investigations are grounded in the dual mission. And here we go. The FBI itself is part of the United States IC. Since the 9/11, FBI is integrated into the IC, and yeah, maybe that's part of the problem. The FBI conducts investigations that may constitute the exercise of both the FBI's criminal investigation and on. Thus, the overlap of the FBI and the IC makes it exceedingly difficult to bifurcate the FBI personnel working on the criminal investigation. We don't want you to separate our agents from this stuff because it's exceedingly difficult to do that because our missions are so intertwined. So, Judge, if you appoint a third party to manage this, we're all going to die again, I guess. They say if, for example, another IC element were to obtain intelligence indicating there was a classified documents that might have been seized, the FBI would be responsible for taking necessary steps to evaluate this. And he's saying, he's saying if they need to cross-index these things, and he's saying it's a big problem and it's going to be complicated. They're going to have to cross-reference spreadsheets and they're going to have to set up a system. And I mean, look how long it's taken to find the pipe bomber that, almost wrecked America in January. Oh, they haven't found him either yet. Yeah. So they're probably very still busy playing the Where's Waldo games over with the J6ers and doing something like this. They're like, Judge, even if it were feasible to bifurcate the FBI personnel involved in this risk assessment from those involved in the criminal investigation, they say, in practical terms, doing so, it doesn't even make any sense, given that the same officials like myself are ultimately responsible for supervising both anyways. And so we should just handle it all anyway. So there's no reason to separate it out. We're basically the same people anyways. So just let us just do whatever we want. In conclusion, they say, for the reasons set forth, the intelligence community's classification review and their risk assessment are inextricably intertwined with the criminal investigation. And I declare this in support of a partial stay, signed off Assistant Director, Counterintelligence Division, Alan Kohler, saying, Judge, please do not appoint a special master. I do not want anybody to see what we're doing over here at the FBI, because then we might be in big trouble. FBI certainly doesn't want that. All right. And so those were the three motions that were the big updates in Donald Trump's attempt to get a special master to exercise some orderliness over this entire saga. But what we'll see in the next coming days, of course, will be Trump and his defense's response. We'll see very likely the actual appellate brief memorandum, something going over to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals at some point down the line. And then we'll see Trump's response to that at some point down the line. And the judge will ultimately issue a ruling on the stay, and we'll see what that looks like. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is also facing some additional challenges. According to ABC News, there is another federal probe, some type of investigation taking place involving the Save America PAC. ABC News had an exclusive on this one, and so we'll jump over here for the story. Written by Catherine Falders, she says that the federal grand jury is now probing Trump's PAC formation and fundraising efforts and other sources. They apparently sent out some subpoenas recently. Federal grand jury is investigating activities leading up to the January 6th attacks, all related to the PAC Save America. Sources with direct knowledge tell ABC News. Isn't this amazing? You go over to the Washington Post, and they, of course, are getting leaks from, I guess maybe Merrick Garland is sending him text. I don't know. But ABC News is also getting more leaks about another potential prosecution against Donald Trump. The interest in the fundraising arm came to light as part of a grand jury subpoena, they say, seeking documents and records from potential witnesses, these sources say. Subpoenas were sent to several individuals in recent weeks. They're specifically seeking to understand the timeline of Save America's formation, the organization's fundraising activities, and how money is both received and spent by the Trump-aligned PAC, right? And this is not just limited to Trump and this PAC. They have gone after Alan Weisselberg, Trump and the Trump Organization CFO. We know they just indicted Steve Bannon for money laundering and conspiracy and all sorts of other charges. And the lawfare continues everywhere you turn. Nobody for Trump or an official with the DOJ commented on this. FBI raided Trump in Mar-a-Lago and other places. But according to Save America, this organization was created. The committee was established just days after the 2020 election. At the time, the filing said the committee was affiliated with Trump's campaign, Make America Great Again committee, focused on small dollars and donors. They say since it started, Save America's PAC has brought in more than $135 million, including transfers from all other sorts of PACs and all sorts of money is moving all over the place. But prosecutors, of course, will continue to just try to turn over every single stone to see if there's anything left that they could squeeze out of Donald Trump. They've been trying it for years. It's like that meme that you see where there's just a constant back and forth. Trump's going to lose in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and here we go. And the litany just continues. So that's Donald Trump. We also have some interesting, what's the word? I don't know. It's not gossip. What's the word? It's like, It's like speculation. Interesting speculation. Kari Lake now being floated as a potential vice presidential candidate for Donald Trump. Very interesting question comes from a journalist when Kari Lake was out campaigning around the state of Arizona. And they say, Kari, you know, a lot of people are talking about a potential presidential ticket, maybe between you, Donald. How do you think that sounds?
Did I get everybody?
Hey, one more question. Would it tap you to be VP? Is that something you would consider?
No, I hate, first of all, I don't like Washington, D.C., especially don't like it now. It's funny, though, that question is asked, because for so long, many of you in the media have been trying to act like I don't have the skill to run for governor. Now, apparently, I'm so skilled that you think I should be VP. So I take it as a compliment. Thank you for asking.
It is a
Thank you for
compliment.
asking.
Have you talked
nice
to
compliment.
Donald Trump about it?
I talk to President Trump all the time, and I have not talked to him about that now. I am applying for the job of Arizona governor, and I'm reaching out to the people every single day.
What do you think? Could Kari Lake make a compelling vice presidential candidate for a Donald Trump ticket? I think so. I think she definitely could. Remember what you want in a vice presidential candidate: somebody who can come out and really deliver a blow towards opposing sides, opposing candidates, opposing politicians. I think it'd be a pretty powerful combination there. I like it. I like the question. But Kari Lake also has another thing to say about this. She's saying, hey, look at all you journalists. Look at all these cameras and all these microphones and all these flashes, and everybody wants to hear from me, Kari Lake. But guess what? Where's my opponent? Where's Katie Hobbs? Why haven't you asked her any questions?
Where is Katie Hobbs right now? She should be standing right here answering your questions. How often does she talk to you? If you're MSNBC, maybe all the time. But if you want to ask her a pressing question, she cowers, and she's a coward. I'm applying for a job, and the people of Arizona are the hiring manager, and they are my boss. And I am going to be here, much to the chagrin of some of you, not just 4 years as your governor. I'm going to be here 8 years as your governor. So have fun and get used to it, because we are going places, and we're going to have the greatest state in the country. Thank you very much.
Have fun and get used to it, baby. It's going to be the greatest state in the country. And she called her opponent the C word again. I don't know if you heard it, but she called her the C word. She said, Katie Hobbs is a big coward, and she's somebody who won't even show up for a debate. Kari Lake laying into it. And I think I like the sound of that little Trump Lake action for 2024. Woo! All right. So that, my friends, is the big update on the Trump special master saga. The special master, of course, being appealed by the U.S. government prosecutors. And so while the Trump saga continues on, we also have another case to follow. We'll continue to cover Trump, of course. But here, my friends, we've got to talk about Steve Bannon, because Bannon also was in the Trump inner circle. Trump, of course, is facing an onslaught all over the place. But Steve Bannon also facing criminal prosecution. Another set. We've covered many of these for a long time. We just finished Steve Bannon's federal criminal trial, where he was charged with 2 counts of contempt of Congress, one for not showing up to the fake January 6th Select Committee's garbage subpoena to testify in front of their committee, and one for not bringing documents over there in front of their sham illegally constituted garbage committee. And they charged him with crimes. It was a very short trial. We went through the entirety of it, but it resulted in Steve Bannon being convicted of 2 counts, both contempt charges. But Steve Bannon is also facing new charges now out of the this is out of the state of New York, not the Southern District of New York. And so today we'll take a look at what those charges are. Both are being brought by these 2 individuals. We'll refresh our memories on who these 2 are. Alvin Bragg and Letitia James, facial spasm TDSer, is also out, charging Steve Bannon with crimes. But before we get into the nuts and bolts, let's make sure we can see sort of what the scene looked like outside the courthouse when Bannon arrived. And he made a brief statement, said a couple things while he was appearing. This is Steve Bannon arriving at the courthouse in New York, facing new criminal charges. Familiar face there. Looks like Ed Schoen is there. That was not Ed Schoen.
This is an irony. On the very day the mayor of this city has a delegation down on the border, they're persecuting people here.
Very, very active media crowd there, obviously around the outside of the Bannon appearance. You can see he makes a statement, and so let's get a different angle to see if we can make out the statement from Steve Bannon. You can see Ed Schoen. There he is. I thought I saw him. There he is, standing right there. The same defense attorney that Bannon had used in his criminal trial for the contempt of Congress charges. Ed Schoen is also there with him today.
Coming? This is an irony. on the very day the mayor of this city has a delegation down on the border, they're persecuting people here and trying to stop on the border. 60 days from the day. 60 days from the day.
Take a step back.
So shaking hands with his defense attorney, Ed Schoen, saying to the media, 60 days on the day until we get up closer, I believe, until the next election. So Steve Bannon saying that, yeah, this is a political prosecution. Pretty obvious what's happening here. Shaking hands with his defense attorney as he makes his way into the courthouse.
60 days from today's election.
Stop hurting America! Stop hurting America! Stop hurting America! Stop hurting America, you greasy grifter! Stop hurting America, you greasy two-bit grifter!
Stop hurting America? Look, who is this lady? She looks exhausted. She looks exhausted. I think you can hear it in her voice. She looks a little bit tired, shouting something into the... Here, you can listen to it. Listen to the sound. There it was. Exhausted. All right. And so I don't even know what she was shouting, but that's Bannon going into the courthouse. Now, look, we've talked about this. Bannon's a tough guy. Obviously, you know, he's been around this game long enough. He's actually been through this process once or twice before, but it's still a very, very terrifying experience for people who are facing any type of criminal consequences. Steve Bannon is facing a whole separate type of criminal consequences. These are being driven by insanely vicious prosecutors who have made their entire careers about prosecuting Trump and Trump's political enemies. And that's a little bit different than a standard, you know, possession of a drug crime or possession of a dangerous weapon that you shouldn't have if you're a prohibited possessor or something like that, right? These are standard sort of charges. These, my friends, are political prosecutions. They're not just regular standard prosecutions. And so normally, you are facing a whole set of unknowns when you're facing criminal charges and going in front of a judge. Don't know what the judge is going to do, whether they had a bad day or not that morning, who knows? So it's not a comfortable thing to go through, whether you've got experience or not. And when you add in that additional variable of this all being governed by drooling prosecutors and hyper-partisan judges, we start to ask ourselves what the actual risk here is for Steve Bannon. Background on the Bannon charges, Politico is reporting for us. It says longtime Trump ally, firebrand Steve Bannon, is now in New York court. Bannon arrived in handcuffs to a crowded arraignment in court hours after surrendering to Alvin Bragg. A self-surrender, which was a good thing. They didn't raid his home like they did other people. Moments before the controversial former advisor Bannon entered, he said a couple things which we'll take a look at. There was a 6-count indictment, and it looks like this is now available. I did not see this earlier. Let's see if we have this available. It is available. My goodness. So we can take a look at the Steve Bannon indictment. And we can cue this one up. I didn't even know that was out. All right. This appears to be the Steve Bannon indictment. Now, what you see here is an immigration advisement. And this is standard according to U.S. code. This gets read or signed off on in almost, or should be signed off on in basically every criminal case. They're just letting you know that, you know, there are immigration consequences if you plead guilty of a crime. This is the indictment for Steve Bannon. You can see it is in the Supreme Court of the state of New York, which is the lower level court. They call it the Supreme Court, but it's not actually the Supreme Court like we think of it on the federal level. It's sort of the lower level court, like you would think of a district level court. But it's the people of the state of New York versus Steve Bannon. We, the grand jury, say a couple different crimes. Money laundering in the second degree says that in New York or elsewhere, says that there were financial transactions. Money was donated to We Build the Wall, Inc. through a crowdfunding website. And that money was used to defraud people. Money laundering in the second degree. Same thing. We Build the Wall. Money was transacted, and there were designs to conceal or disguise the nature of the transaction. Conspiracy, right? Fourth degree, basically working with other people, whatever that is. They say during the period of this conspiracy, an individual known to the grand jury, unindicted co-conspirator, so some sort of a mole, was the president and chief executive officer of We Build the Wall. I'm sure we know who that is. It says a nonprofit with the goal of building the wall. Others engaged in a scheme to defraud, in that Build the Wall was primarily being used to solicit donations and raise money, including from people of New York. All of this done with the intention of defrauding certain people. How did it work? Well, it says through the conspiracy, the people at We Build the Wall solicited donations through a website. They promised that the money would be used to build the wall, that they would not be taking compensation, saying that all of this is going to be used for the media narrative, and saying that unindicted co-conspirator received over $250,000 in secret payments, despite saying that they weren't going to use the money for those things. The effort, right, the money was being used to promote additional fundraising, it looks like. They've got some text messages with Bannon, and so you're going to go through this whole thing. You've got some overt acts of the conspiracy. They updated their website. They sent emails. They sent text messages back and forth. All right, so this is a very long indictment. 25 pages. Okay, so they have the litany, the timeline of all the events, September 13th, 2019, all 2019 charges. And I'm guessing this really resembles the federal indictment, right? It's basically they're taking the federal case and they're just applying it down to the state level because he was pardoned at the federal level. So they can really take some of those same things and just apply it to state law, right? They just take the federal law, the U.S. Code, they swap that out. They take the same facts, they apply it under state law, and they prosecute it under state law. So I don't think there's anything really new in here, right? All of this was all sort of part of the original charges, because in the original federal case, as we talked about, I think this was yesterday, we talked about Bannon, who was pardoned, but the other guy, one of the other co-conspirators, alleged co-conspirators, was not convicted. There was a mistrial that happened, and the other guy pled guilty. So this is very long. Look how detailed this is. On August 29th, September 13th, September 17th. A lot of transfers, entity 2 transferring 23. So it's a bunch of spreadsheets, money all, flying all over the place, saying they're still taking donations. They're not delivering on the promise. Therefore, death penalty signed off on here by Alvin Bragg. Now, Alvin Bragg is one of the New York prosecutors who is, of course, behind, this particular political prosecution. And let's see what Alvin Bragg had to say at the press conference for Steve Bannon. This is the New York City prosecutor explaining why they had to go after Bannon while they are letting everybody else, apparently in New York, free.
We are here today to announce the indictment of Stephen Bannon and We Build the Wall Incorporated for a year-long fundraising scheme that netted more than $15 million from thousands of donors across the country based on false pretenses. Specifically, the false promise that all of the funds obtained to We Build the Wall would go toward the construction of a wall on the border of the United States and Mexico. And that, and I quote, not a penny, end quote, would go to its president's salary.
There you go. Do you see that right there? So the president took a salary of some sort, and they said not a penny would go to the salary, and therefore criminal terrorists who probably deserve the death penalty. So that's what's going on in New York. Now, we also know this woman, Letitia James, the tishiest of all the tishies. You may remember her. She's the woman from New York, the attorney general, who made it her entire career to prosecute the former president, his allies, anybody involved. She, if you have a TDS scale, she's a 10 out of 10. I mean, I really am hard pressed to find somebody else who is more TDS demented than Letitia, the Tishy James. And you can see this in some of these clips. In fact, we have one where she has literal facial contortions because she's so upset about Donald.
What would you say to people who say, oh, I'm not going to bother to register to vote because my voice doesn't make a difference, or I'm just one person?
I say one name, Donald Trump.
Donald Trump?
Motivate you. Get off your ass and vote.
I'm coming for you?
Will you sue him for us?
Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the ass.
Will you sue Trump for us?
I love it. He probably does already.
He built his wealth off the backs of New Yorkers. We need to focus on Donald Trump and his abuses. We need to follow his money. We need to find out where he's laundered money. All of those transactions have happened here in New York City. Tell this president and every other individual that no one is above the law.
I say the bottom line is that presidents from Brooklyn who are going to really make the difference are energized. Individuals from the city are energized. Individuals who care about statewide issues are energized. Individuals who care about, again, going after Donald Trump, this illegitimate governor president.
Illegitimate president. Did you hear her say that? Illegitimate president. That means insurrectionist right there. You're looking at it. Insurrectionist from New York. Elected attorney general. Now we're getting real close. We're not going to suffer through a lot more of this, but here is the facial spasm that we are always cognizant about. Watch the actual contortions as she goes through this. She says, I'm running for attorney general because I'll never be afraid to challenge this illegitimate president.
Running for attorney general because I will never be afraid to challenge this illegitimate president.
See
and
it?
Our fundamental rights are at stake.
Did you see that? She is so upset about Donald Trump. So this woman who apparently, right, this is the New York Attorney General. This is supposed to be somebody who is an independent purveyor of justice, somebody who equally applies the law, and so on and so forth. And she's now prosecuting Steve Bannon. Listen to this lunatic who says that she is a fair and impartial individual.
Too often, powerful political interest, they ignore these rules. They think that they are above the law. And the most egregious of them take advantage of hard-working Americans in the process. And Steve Bannon stands out as a perfect example of this blatant inequality. He gained power and influence as a top advisor to the former president.
Oh, gosh.
And he used that influence and those connections to cheat everyday Americans and carry out this fraud. You see, Bannon was the architect of Trump's plan to build a wall between the United States and Mexico.
Do you think she rehearses this in the mirror in the morning? I'm sure she does.
So when Mr. Bannon created a fundraising scheme to finance the construction of that wall, he basically stole millions of dollars to line his own pocket.
Okay, so yeah, all right. So you see what's going on here, right? It's just two angry prosecutors who've made their entire careers on the back of Trump and prosecuting anything closely related to Trump. And Bannon is just another person who is in the line of what probably will be a long list of political prosecutions taking place in this country. Wild times. We also have Bannon now, of course, being given the perp walk. A lot of media there. You saw this scene, Bannon walking into the courthouse. Bannon here surrounded by the media. And you can see the media as Bannon walks up. This is the other angle. It's just throng. It's 3 or 4 people deep in the background, right? You can see the media is just surrounding the entirety of the affair. That's outside. But the media also makes their way into the building as the prosecutors and the judge line them up behind literal barricades. Bannon prosecutors and the court allowed the hallway to be set up with barricades so that the media could just fill in with their cameras and they could watch the perp walk of Steve Bannon. And Bannon has something to say, and so we'll let this play so that we all can see what is actually happening in America.
For every conservative American, this is what happens in the last days of a dying regime. They will never shut me up. They'll have to kill me first. I have not yet begun to fight.
So Steve Bannon being dragged across the coals in front of the media, totally intentionally done, so that they could all get their camera, they could all get their pound of flesh, they could all get their Twitter posts and their memes and everything going. Steve Bannon facing a purely political prosecution by 2 psycho prosecutors who've made their entire careers about it. And so we'll continue to cover that case. And I hope you join us on that journey as we do. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for hitting the like button and following along. All right. And we've got one final story today, one final segment before we jump into your questions and your comments over from our friends at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And shout out to Terry Yellowhorse, who just became a supporter. Amazing. Welcome, Terry. Glad that you're joining us. Join us on our morning walk and talks and other things over there. And we'll take a quick water break here, my friends. And I saw some nice super chats or some locals tips over on, from John McGarvey's in the house over on locals, and John Allen's in the house. Very generous. All right. And so we got this one segment. Now, this is a weird one because this Democrat, he's a Democrat. Yeah. D Nice says it's a wine break. Yeah, refill those glasses. We've got one final segment, and then we've got all the questions and comments to get to. And so without any further ado, let's do it, shall we? Let me click this button. Yeah, this is a crazy story. We talked about this one on our morning walk and talk wild. A Democrat politician in, Las Vegas? A Democrat politician in Nevada is facing murder charges. Wild story, something that developed over the last week. It involves this image. You can see very strange footage of a silhouetted figure in a orange, I think it's sort of maybe a landscaping type of an outfit with a sort of a straw sombrero gardening hat, but very strange white gloves. And turns out that actually may be this guy named Robert Tellis, who is a public administrator, an elected official over in Nevada. And he had a real big beef with this guy. You see this guy on the right is named Jeffry German. And the beef was so big that apparently it led to murder. And so I want to go through this story because it was captivating to follow this along. And, anytime you hear about a journalist dying, or being murdered, not just dying, being murdered, stabbed to death in his front yard, you start to get those eyebrows raised. What? That's kind of strange. I wonder if it was related to anything that they were investigating. I wonder if it was related to government negligence or any sort of corruption or what. We'll have to see. But I want to get some background on this story first before we dive into the court proceedings. You can see there was some serious background beef here. First, let's learn about this individual, Robert Tellis. You can see he was actually a public administrator elected over in the state of Nevada. Primary focus was to ensure that the community does all this stuff. He focused on estate planning and probate matters. He has 3 wonderful children, happily married, and graduated from law school. Received numerous awards, and he's somebody who has done a lot of community things. Now, they took his photograph off, or the photograph is broken. This is the actual website over there in Nevada. And it's now taken down. It's been deleted. But that's a little bit about his elected position. And then what we see is there was a big back and forth between this reporter, and a lot of this was taking place on Twitter, right? So there was an election that took place, and Robert Tellis lost the primary, right? We've been following these primaries all over the place. Robert Tellis lost. And when that happened, he posted this over on Twitter. And part of this was a sort of a back and forth between Jeff German, which is this journalist, and Robert Tellis. This is on Twitter right now. Rob Tellis says, "Does the Las Vegas Review-Journal know that your journalist, Jeffry German, is double dutying on their time? Did they make, they're saying he made a veiled threat to me after I already lost the election," right? After I already lost the election. Jeff sent this to Rob. He says, "Rob, I'm putting together another story on your office, buddy boy. You better be prepared for it. This has to do with the letter you posted on your campaign addressing hostile work allegations. Employees view that as a threat of retaliation, and they've reported it to Human Resources. I'd like your comments on that, as well as your take on the election results. I would need something from you this afternoon," right? And so Rob posts that on Twitter, and he says, "This guy's making threats to me." So Rob all suddenly is sort of, getting a little bit of a little agitated with this German guy. And so it continues on. Shortly after that, on June 17th, Rob Tellis posts this on Twitter, and he's needling Jeff German again. He says, "My wife hears rustling in the trash. She says to me, 'Honey, is there a wild animal in the trash?' Jeff says, 'No, dear. Looks like it's just Jeff Germain going through our trash for his 4th story this time.' Oh, Jeff." And he does the laughing emoji, tagging him, saying that, right, Jeff Germain is running through his trash. He says, oh shoot, I left a pizza box in there and sushi containers in the trash. In the next article, I'm going to have mob and Yakuza ties. He says, typical bully, can't take a pound of criticism after slinging 100 pounds of BS, up to Article 4 now. You'd think he'd have better things to do, right? And all that happens. Now, then we see there is an actual loss of the election, okay? Jeff German writes the article about the election loss. He says, it's official. The reporter says, Robert Tellis has lost his re-election, big. County commissioners certified the election results on Friday. And then guess what happens? Murdered. Jeff German is murdered on 9/3, just shortly a week ago. The story says that now police have arrested that county official, Robert Tellis, in the death of Robert German. They didn't know what was going on, but they say he has been arrested on suspicion of murder as a result of the investigation about the death of Jeff German. Stunning development came a day after Las Vegas police asked for the public's help in identifying the suspect in the case. An early morning search of Tellis's home on Wednesday provided the first indication that the Friday killing might be related to German's work in exposing the public wrongdoing. The investigative reporter was pursuing a potential follow-up story about Tellis in the weeks before he was killed. Police arrived at Tellis's home on the Spanish Steps Lane, Western Valley, 6:30 a.m., blocked off the nearby streets. Shortly before 9 a.m., police released statements saying that they're currently serving search warrants. They announced on Thursday that Tellis's DNA was found at the scene of the fatal stabbing. The newsroom is very excited. They're saying, we're relieved that Tellis is in custody. We're outraged that a colleague appears to have been killed for reporting on an elected official. Journalists can't do important work our communities require if they're afraid a presentation of facts could lead to violent retribution. We thank Las Vegas for their urgency. Police released an image at a news conference, and they were able to identify the vehicle. The GMC vehicle and a second vehicle were towed from Tellis's home. Detectives interviewed Tellis, and the scene at the neighborhood was just sort of crazy. So let's take a quick look at that. After the news broke that they started to sort of zone in on this identity of this person, the police released this surveillance footage. You see him walking down the street in a garden sombrero and full body outfit with a bag and gloves and maybe a mask on and shoes. Super chat from STF UFFS says, nice outfit. Average Vegas 2020 temperature 103. Yeah. Doesn't seem all that ideal to be sort of wearing that getup. All right. And it does look like he's wearing a mask right there. He's got his face covered. So he is a literal, like he's in a getup. He's trying to blend in as a construction worker. I don't know if he put duct tape around this orange shirt or what he did, but he's all suited up. That's his murder suit, right? He's walking down the street in a murder suit to go murder a journalist who wrote a bad story about him. And that led to the reveal of the vehicle, and they found the vehicle in his front yard and they took it from there. Now, when the police started to sort of zone in on him a little bit, the media started to surround his house, and Robert Tellis appears at his property in a full hazmat suit as he's walking back into the house. Watch this.
Can you comment?
This murder? Did you do this? Tell us anything?
Why did police tow away your vehicle?
Do you have a comment?
Opens the garage, walks inside, shuts the garage. In a full hazmat suit. Weird. So the police zone in on him and they go to his residence to try to execute a warrant, and something happens. We still don't know the details of this. This is the scene, police appearing at the neighborhood of Robert Tellis, who of course is being investigated for allegedly killing a journalist who was investigating his crimes. SWAT team, major forces piling into the guy's residence. And then after a short while, he comes out on a gurney. Now, again, we don't know much there. He doesn't seem too injured because he showed up in court later, but a short clip, you can see him being carried out right there on a gurney into the back of the police vehicle. Very, very interesting. So then he finally shows up to court, and we see him sort of very briefly behind the glass. You can see this is the court proceeding taking place on the right side here. And Mr. Tellis is going to be brought out through this door and sort of put in the defendant's box right here while they do proceedings and they do an arraignment there in court. So you can watch him. If you look right here in the center of the screen, they'll zoom in on him. You'll see a quick look of his face outside of the murder suit. There he is. Well, actually, he's in the doorway right there. There he is. Short guy. You can see him. Shorter guy. Shout out to my short brothers and sisters. So it is a very strange case, and the press conference that was held by Nevada officials came out today, and they said, yeah, it's pretty much him. You know, we've got DNA. You can see the photograph there showing that they've got surveillance footage of him walking down the street.
Yesterday, and Tellis was taken into custody safely and arrested, as the sheriff talked about. I'll just quickly conclude my part by saying thank you to the homicide unit in particular. We are very fortunate in Las Vegas. We have the best homicide unit in the country with the highest solvability rate in the country. And they worked tirelessly, as the sheriff pointed out, to succeed in this case. And then there were a lot of supporting units from the lab, technicians, to our tactical teams, and everyone else involved that did a tremendous job, as well as...
It sounds like case closed. You know, evidence was there and they're going to have to, you know, prove it, but the motive was certainly there. I mean, the guy, just from his Twitter posts alone, seems like he wanted him murdered and dead. And let that be a lesson to you at home. If you're planning to murder somebody, this is not legal advice, don't post angry memes about him and don't rant about him on your Twitter profile. And also don't murder people, right? In general, good rule. All right, my friends. Now, that was it for the big segments on the program for the day. And so we covered a lot of ground, as you can see. Very interesting story. Democrat Dexter murderer out of Nevada. We'll see what happens with him. We had Bannon's indictment, which is going to be another case that we'll follow. We'll see how much access we get to court documents and others and what Tishy James has to say about it. And of course, the appeal of Donald Trump's special master order. Government prosecutors do not want any oversight at all. And so they're appealing that up to the 11th Circuit. We'll continue to cover that as well. But now, my friends, it's time to hear from you and to see what you have to say about it. I mean, this is a live stream after all, and it's better when we get to hear from you and see what you have to say about all of this. So let's jump on over to YouTube. We've got a couple here. We've got Awakened Speaker says, wasn't Bannon pardoned for this? I really love your show. Well, Awakened Speaker, as I said, I love you back. And yeah, we hit this one earlier when we were going through a lot of this, but yeah, it's a separate jurisdiction. It's a separate charge. The presidential pardon power can't go all the way down and extend into states. We have that system of federalism. So yeah, Bannon can be prosecuted. It's kind of a weird thing, right? But it's how it works. Caddy did too on local, says, what can be done about the prosecutions? Vote. Yeah, vote out the bad people who are doing the bad prosecutions is really the only way. Bear Ashby says, DOJ FBI needs to seek mental health immediately. You mean like the whole agency? Yeah, like everybody, just like an assembly line of mental health care probably would be useful. STFU says, you greasy 2-bit grifter. LMAO. I don't know if that's about me. If it is, that's fine. Thank you, STFU. Oil Smoke Jones says, the quote, nuclear code is updated daily, so why the anxiety attacks over what Trump might have had? Hint, the whole thing is a political hit job. Yeah, you're exactly right about that. Well, Oil Smoke, there's certain people that want to get up and get that hit of perpetual fear every morning. I mean, why else do you why did people turn on CNN and watch that death scoreboard every day? Oh, yeah. Trump's responsible for more dead people. Oh, yeah. Dead people all over the place. Perfect. And they were just every day. It was like a scoreboard. They want that perpetual fear. They want you to be in this constant state of stress and anxiety and worried all over the time. And, you get people like Andrew Weissman. He wakes up every day. I think what he does is he wakes up and he sees what Trump does because it might impact his day. And it's a weird way to live, man. But there's a lot of people that do. Weird way to live, but a lot of people live that way. So it is a political hit job. Anxiety attacks, it's sort of like a hit of dopamine for people. They wouldn't know what to do without it. STFU says, screaming like a lunatic while the FBI ignores your Jack Ruby Act takes the win out of you. Karen? You could almost smell the clout thirst when she turned, scanning for the MSNBC close-up that she hoped for. I think you're talking about Letitia James. She was rehearsing that, right, all the time. Illegitimate president. Whatever she does. Terry Yellowstone became a member. Shout out to Terry. Welcome to Terry. STFU says, nice outfit, average in Vegas. and STFU says, greasy two big grifters, feminazi chasing Bannon. Yeah, that's okay. That's who it was. Yeah, Letitia James. She is. I mean, her whole campaign is running. Could you imagine that? Running for a prosecutor for one purpose, basically, Trump. It's terrible. Not appropriate at all. Not appropriate in any way, shape, or form. But all right. And so let's jump on over to locals. Oh, gosh. We've got a troll master, John McGarvey, in the house. I just saw that one. Where's that one? All right. Let's start down here at the bottom, my friends. And we had a couple coming in to start us Troll Master's in the house. He says special master right there. What do you think about that? Special master, Govea. I like it. It's ultra mega. That's in front of Jackson Hole. There's a little town there in Jackson Hole where I visited, and that was from a morning walk and talk. I think I was having breakfast or dinner with the family. Amazing, beautiful place. And also, I love that hairdo. I'll work on that. I'll see if I can maybe get that at some point. Thank you, Troll Master. He says, big shout out to the youngest girlie. Shout out to the youngest girlie over at the Three Girlies household. Always in order and a good way to get the show started. Three Girlies says, it's youngest girlie's birthday. We're headed out to dinner, but we're going to listen later. Oh my goodness. Happy birthday to the youngest girlie. Happy birthday to the youngest girlie. Happy birthday to the youngest girlie. Happy birthday to you. Hope you're having an amazing birthday, youngest girlie. Probably will only happen one time, that song, probably only for you. So congratulations on going out and having another amazing year under your belt. I hope it was an amazing year. I think you're 14 now. Is that right? Woo! That's just outstanding. And I hope you're having a great day celebrating youngest girlie over at the Three Girlies household. Dinner with the family, always a great way to celebrate. You can see Sergeant Bob says hello. Lots of cake, lots of ice cream. Happy birthday from Vienticus and Trollmaster chiming in as well. Outstanding, outstanding. Enjoyed the birthday. All right, let's see what else we had over here from Paul Me No. Oh gosh, we got the memes. We got more memes here. Oh gosh. Oh my gosh, this one is just too outstanding. Oh, look at this one. Oh, there you go. Fake news. That's me, baby. Some days I feel like that. Some days if I listen off, if I take a couple days out of the gym, that's kind of how I feel. I'm 37 now. It's like getting older. It is the midsection, especially right there, kind of at the base of the midsection. Yeah, that's what I feel like. Oh, Paul, me know. All right, Miss Lucky says, Sergeant Bob, assuming Kari can win Arizona, I hope she needs to excel as governor. For 4 years to be ready for national office. Besides, she is too strong to run with President Trump. Just my thoughts. Ooh, she needs to excel as a governor for 4 years and be ready for national office. Too strong to run with Trump. Just my thoughts. That's a good take, Sergeant Bob. You think maybe it's a little bit too much? Too much elbowing going on. I don't know. I think it might invigorate the entire, conservative base of the country, and everybody would show up and vote like mad. Don't know though. Sergeant Bob also says, sir, there is nothing strange in Las Vegas. It's all weird. We hustle through as fast as can be when we must pass through. Vegas. I haven't been to Vegas in a while. It's been a long time. You kind of grow out of that one, I think. It's close. I don't know. Maybe I should go again. I used to go for legal conferences, and then I stopped going to legal conferences. And that was a good decision. All right, let's take a quick look at some of these other comments here. We're just getting started. Former LEO, he says, well, consider this as a public service announcement, even though it's a little off topic. He says the corrupt Biden administration is backing a plan to return to a policy that almost destroyed this country. Says with the backing of the federal government, zero down payment and zero closing costs home mortgages will be offered again. The failure to understand or acknowledge history will inevitably lead to the same failed outcome. We have already had one bank bailout, and this sets the stage for the second bank bailout program. The destruction of the United States is the global of the Democratic Party. Jason on Blast says, thank God tomorrow's Friday. Shout out to Jason. I'm here with you. Oh, here's another one. Yeah, has a GIF of Twitchy Tishy James. Is that the illegitimate president? Oh my gosh, that's horrendous. Get it off the screen. Thank you, Vientikiss, for that one. Miss Lucky and Sergeant Bob says irreparable harm to the government. They mean that they may be stopped from leaking like the Titanic. Could be one. Paul Mino says, how could the FBI do this to me? JFK says, you got off easy. Oh, that's morbid. But it's true. Thank you, Paul. Thunder7 says, the DOJ just filed an appeal. I find it strange that they would fight so passionately against the third-party review unless they knew how corrupt they were. They fear being exposed. I think that's true, Thunder. There is actually, a lot of people saying that, that's basically Lawrence Tribe's argument. He said that there was, this was, I guess, as bad in terms of precedent as Korematsu and as Dred Scott. And that's insane. And it's not, again, this is not saying that they're dismissing the charges or anything like that, right? It's not like Trump runs free. Trump's exonerated. The judge didn't say, oh yeah, no, he's totally innocent. All the judge did is say, we're going to have a special master appointed just to take a look at things. That's it. And they're all melting down over it. The Veil says, happy birthday, youngest girlie. Rob, the great news broadcasters had a signature sign-off when they ended their radio news hour. You could do your signature sign-off with your shine that great big beautiful spotlight when you complete your discussion about your law firm. Thank you for that. That's a great suggestion, The Veil. Thank you for that one. I'll have to think about it. We have another one from Sergeant Bob. He says, all this sounds like the FBI Academy is relocated to Disney World and put Mickey Mouse in charge. They'd probably be run better. Robute says, can you plead the fifth to not comply with a criminal subpoena like Alex Jones because you fear a Gestapo witch hunt? Well, I mean, you have to respond to the subpoena, but your response can be like for example, right? Like Bannon got a subpoena. He did not respond to the subpoena. He could have challenged the subpoena in court, or he could have shown up to the subpoena and then pled the fifth. But you can't just sort of say, I plead the fifth, I'm not going to respond to a subpoena. There's got to be some sort of process there. We had another one from Speech. He says, I hope the judge tells the FBI to worry about figuring out who is leaking info to the press about the confidential info before claiming how important it is that they review more of the documents. Also, that she tells him to just pound sand. Very simply. Me too. Me too, Speech. I would love to see that. I hope it happens. Robute says, have you seen on Twitter that people want to disbar Cannon because she asked for a third-party review? Yeah, I have. They state that a special master is obstruction and that she should recuse herself. Fascists on Twitter consider anything getting in the way of their witch hunt as obstruction. Note they did not care about old Bruce Reinhardt not recusing himself and serving this warrant. They can just enjoy themselves, says Robute. Speech Unleashed says Kari Lake would shred Kamala in a VP debate. I would pay good money to see that. Yeah, that would be just a ton of fun. Could you imagine? I would love that one. Here is Robute saying Steve Bannon and Donald Trump should consider any indictment as a witch hunt, a politically motivated prosecution, plead the fifth, and invoke it. Well, they basically did. I mean, Steve Bannon basically did that during his trial. Sergeant Bob says, must not be enough real criminals in New York for the grimacing Letitia. Crime rampant in New York, but that is not important, says Sergeant Bob. This one came in from Hunter's crack dealer. He says, all right, people, for those of you who seem to love GIF, not GIF, peanut butter, please just stop. GIF stands for Graphics Interchange Format. Graphics, G, not J. Oh gosh, here we go. Oh, gosh, here we go. I've been in IT since the inception of the PC and before. Yes, that's dating me. With tons of clients who are publishers, graphic artists, photographers, photo editors. And yeah, I'm only part-time crack dealer, especially since I can't get Hunter to pay me. I guess all this money goes back to the big guy. He says, anyways, in all these years, I emphasize never had any of my clients call it GIF. Only recently has this become an issue because of all the peanut butter, young whippersnappers who think that they know best. For example, Windows 8 and the beginning of its downfall. By the way, does anyone need some white powder? Asking for a friend. Hunter Biden's crack dealer. Hunter Biden's crack dealer, he's got the goods, baby. He's got the computer technical knowledge on graphical interchange formats, and he's also got peanut butter knowledge. Outstanding. Viantica says, did you forget that the person that came up with the file format named it with a soft G? Yeah, did he call it Graphics? Yeah, maybe. Yeah. What do you think about that, Hunter's crack dealer? Maybe it's graphics interchange format, not graphics. Could be. Viantikiss is also here. Oh, we got another meme. It's meme day. We've got Paul. He says Bannon needs a new lawyer. Oh gosh. So basically, Paul has just this photograph that you can just stamp wherever you want it. But this is a good one. What is this? What is this from? This is a good one. That sort of, that's Bannon. I'd float that suit. No problem at all. Look at that gold chain there too, by the way. That's great. Thank you, Paul, for the memes today. We've got Thunder7. He says, while Tishy and Bragg go after the law-abiding nonviolent patriot Bannon, crime is surging in New York. People are being murdered, robbed, and destroyed daily, and BLM Marxist founders stole millions and millions of dollars. That's true. Yeah, the BLMers, why aren't they being, paraded in front of the media? Patrisse Cullors, how many tens of millions of dollars did she repurpose? TDS is so severe in many Dems that they can't even function anymore. Major crime continues to surge, up 36% this year. New police data. Thank you, Thunder7. Here, The Veil says, her last name is Trishy, not Tushy? With as much as she has done, does she qualify to legally change her name to Tushy? The Veil says, regarding Albert against Bannon, apologies came in late. Have to question something. When Bannon and others were receiving the donations for Build the Wall, there were a lot of people complaining it's not being built fast enough or built at all. What many people do when they want something done is they want it done immediately, not realizing that it takes time to make material for the construction, finding contractors capable to build, and get the equipment together to move the stuff, and then legal access to build. Sometimes this takes a while. Was this the source of the complaint or broken down in the complaint, or was it mostly talking about donations as payments as Bannon's income? I think the crux of it, and so we flew through it, it's a big document, but I think it's also about benefits received. So not just about like the classic, the technical definition of income, but also to the benefit received. So like if he went on a boat ride and there were funds used to pay for the boat ride, that wasn't income, but that was sort of a benefit he received. And so I think it's about that complaint. And they said, Alvin Bragg came out and he said it. He said, not one penny is going to be used for something else other than the wall. So if they ordered lunch, that's 1 penny. They made public statements saying not 1 penny would be used. Anywhere in an accounting, they're going to find 1 penny that was used for a sandwich, and they're all going to get the death penalty. Thank you, See the Veil. Former LEO says, this looks like your basic left-wing radical crazy terrorist that apparently murdered a journalist. Yeah, you pretty much nailed it. Nothing to see here. Just a Democratic terrorist. Will Garfield make a statement about this Democratic terrorist? Isn't this how all Democrats handle divergent opinions? I thought I was using the word Democrat a lot in that saga, but former LEO certainly beat me to it. All right, and so let me see what else we've got. C. Reed is here. He said, do you know if the Queen's will is... okay, I'm not going to make any Queen's will comment. I don't know what that comment is. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Dressing up for the cover of Communist Q. Love it. We have another one here. Bidenhood. I take money from Americans and give them to Ukraine. Yeah, a lot of it too. Here's another one. Big booty Latinas over in the GQ. Yeah, big juicy booties too. Look at the juice there. And the corgis are getting, I guess, eviscerated at the Jedi School for Kids. I'm not sure what that one is, but all right. Thank you for that, C. Reed. Rai T says... Today is a sad day. A third of the world's population, 2.5 billion people today, lost their head of the Commonwealth of the Nations, with 15 countries around the globe losing their queen, including your neighbor to the north. Please may we pay our respects to Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, on her death at the age of 96, which is amazing. That is an amazing life. The Queen was the longest lived and longest reigning monarch in British history, a feat which none of us will be honored to witness again in our lifetimes. Her eldest son, Charles, today became King Charles III to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, plus 14 other nations over multiple continents. The Queen is dead. Long live the King. That came in from Rye T. Thank you for sharing that, Rye T. You know, there's a little bit, I think, of a disconnect between the United States and the UK about the Queen and about, you know, at least from my perspective. You know, I'm not as educated about that system and that whole process, but recognize the length of her tenure. I mean, the fact, you know, all of the images that I've been seeing on Twitter. I mean, all of the presidents she met with and all of the history there. I mean, it is incredible. I saw one post saying that she was alive for 30% of American history or something like that, right? She was the queen, the official queen for 30% of American history. And you just go, what? It's mind blowing. You know, it really is. It's just mind blowing. And the fact that, you know, it's pretty incredible. And I know a lot of people are mourning out there today. And so, yes, you know, our thoughts and prayers for all of you who are, you know, grieving this loss, and may she rest in peace, and may our relationship with our allies over there continue as you guys recover. You know, we're here for you in your time of need. But thank you for that very nice statement, right, T? It is a big thing. It's an amazing thing, and I'm glad that you shared that. Thank you for posting that. Captain Jim says, hey, Rob, how would you defend the Tells guy? I'd be very curious to know your take on his defense. Well, I mean, I don't know what the evidence says, but there's probably all sorts of evidence about, I'd like to know how they place him there, but I have to think about that. Let's let this case mature a little bit before we see what the evidence looks like. But I mean, I don't know what you do when he's walking down the street in that outfit right off the cuff. Thunder 7 says, I know it's not Meme Friday, but I couldn't resist. Well, we'll just get to it. Trump advisor to Trump says, U.S. naval officer, Harvard, MBA, banker, investment mogul, establishment outsider, loves America versus Al Sharpton. Trump, college dropout, tour manager for a felon, tax evader, racist, and hates America. Do we love Steve Bannon or do we love Steve Bannon is what he says. That's funny. Al Sharpton. He's lost a lot of weight. Man, look at him. He looks thin. All right. Thank you for that, Thunder 7. Miss Lucky says, Sergeant Bob, only wake up in fear if you're on the bad side of the Clinton crime family. Otherwise, you're probably good. Rai T says, you're 37? Yeah, I just turned it, you know. Getting old. I mean, I'm in my late 30s now. Oh, great. You know, but it's good. It's good. Every year life gets better. I think that is true. And we did a quick refresh over here. Let's see what we've got. Words Mean Thing says, hey, Rob, you were talking about the government giving deadlines to the judge who ordered the special master. Well, the government is giving us a deadline, too. The Department of Ed has made major changes to Title IX that will change banning sexual discrimination to banning discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. You know, Words Mean Thing, I think we talked about this on this channel a long time ago, like as a proposal. The reach of these changes would be wide-ranging. This is frightening. The American public has until September 12th, this coming Monday, to register our thoughts on the issue. This website gives more information. I encourage everyone to take a look at it and take action while we still can. All right, let's pull this up and see what we've got here. I'm pretty sure that we covered this at some point, not from this organization, but yeah, I think there was a lawsuit. Isn't somebody suing over this? I thought we looked at something here. U.S. Department of Education. Okay, so this is the website. Submit your comments to the Federal Register here. This looks like it takes you actually to the federalregister.gov and follow the instructions. So it's got some very good instructions on what you can do if you want to make your comments heard over at the Child and Parental Rights Campaign. And if you want the URL on that, childparentrights.org. And it looks like if you go over there, to the main page. Yeah, all sorts of good information there. Nonpartisan, non-public, nonprofit, public interest law firm. Awesome. Very cool. Thank you for spreading the word on that. I think that looks like a very nice, legitimate resource. The Reach is coming out on Monday, so go check that out. Thank you, Wordsman Things, for spreading that news for us here. Speech says, seems like the supports have spoken. Time to bring back the big, beautiful spotlight. Yeah, thanks, Speech. Yeah, Speech opened that whole can. Thank you. I like to say it, but it's just not appropriate at the beginning. Jeff Rook says, I've been too busy and distracted with work to jump on the live streams. Still distracted tonight, so I won't hear you read this, but keep up the good work, says Jeff. Maybe you've discussed it already, but if you all haven't noticed, independent voices like yours are a clear factor behind why the corrupt establishmentarians are losing control. I expect some dangerous death rattles from them, but the fact that we've gotten this far is an effing miracle in my book. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah. Yes. I agree with you. I think that it is very important for, it requires many different parts to it. You have to have viewers, supporters, people who are willing to suffer through, moving platforms. And, this show has gone through so many permutations and live and not, all sorts of things. It is a journey. It is a battle, like for everybody here. I'm sure you've had content creators get booted off and, it's sort of we're all in it together, my friend, and I appreciate your support. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for being here. Wouldn't be able to do this without you. So thank you. Here, Vientika says, here's a quick and dirty something. I don't have all the nifty tools that everyone else has. Oh, gosh. Once Elon makes it so that we can upload ourselves into the cloud, I'd be down for something like that. It's a nice look. I really like the 8 balls in particular. Thank you, Vientikis. Here's another one from Paul. From Ted Lasso says, some people pronounce it GIF. And then he makes the face like, ew, they're unsophisticated, GIFers. All right. And so that's from Ted Lasso. Is that a good show? I never watched that show. Miss Lucky says, Queen Elizabeth repaired and drove trucks for the army in World War II. She did her bit. That's amazing. I didn't know that. Yeah. As I said, I'm pretty uneducated on the whole thing, but it is incredible. Just that amount of history, like it's incredible. Let's see. We had another reference here. Here, Martin says, fact is, GIF was born GIF and only became a hard G GIF since millennials came out and started maturing and decided that they invented everything. All right. Meanwhile, us Gen X will be here when y'all get around to thanking us. Time Magazine. Okay, let's see what this article says here. Time Magazine says, here's the, what does Time know, honestly? But they are Time. Let's see what they have to opine on this topic. Here's a timeline and how the debate to pronounce GIF and GIF. It swelled. The debate ends up back. So I guess, yeah, it originated. Look at this. Look at all these details here. Good, great, GIF. Or is it giant giraffe GIF? Oh, yeah. So for all you hard Gers out there, there's like, what graphics is what? Giraffics? Yeah, just like this. Giant, giraffe, and GIF. All right. This is now going to be a whole channel about graphical interface documents. All right. So let's see what else we've got. Thank you, Martin. Robute says, is it in the Arizona Constitution that the governor can only serve 2 terms? Yes, we are term limited here. Rai T says, what happened to the R&R thing you used to have on the wall? I remember the scales falling off the wall once a while ago. Haha. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Rai. Yeah, that happened like one time. And you remembered that? How many shows have we done? Good Lord. Yeah, it did fall off the wall. Okay. I didn't put enough double-sided sticky tape on the thing. Yeah, that was the R&R logo sign, right? So I actually had a studio at the office, and now I have a studio at home because I was tired of going into the office to record. I wanted to record more than that. And so I now record at home. So that office has been repurposed. Our office manager, Lily, is now in that office. And she got rid of the sign in there. She painted it yellow, and it's all, perky in there and nice and happy. And so it's been repurposed. But thank you for bringing it up. I'm happy that you did. Here, this one comes in from The Veil. says, oh, dang, Charles became king. What country was that again with all the wars and stuff? It says, last I checked, it's just a place known as Title IX doesn't exist. That's a comment from the Veil. I think having something to say about the Queen. Let's do a quick refresh over there. Charles became the king. Yeah. Here, Martin says, why would they call it Giphy? It's a play on Jiffy. Or maybe it's jiffy.com instead of giphy.com. I don't know. But at some point, we'll probably have to set up a pay-per-view deathmatch on this topic, and we'll see how that goes. I don't even know what side I'll be on. I can referee the whole thing. I say them both. Rai T says, petition to get the logo back on the wall at your home office. More tape this time. A petition to get the logo back. Well, then I'd have to, I could put our law, like I could put letters or something there. I certainly could. But now I have a different setup. So that other setup was shooting into a corner. Now I'm shooting into a straight wall. So I don't have the corner. We got a lot of petitions here today, but I appreciate the suggestions. They're always good suggestions. How's the audio? Is the audio better today? I made some adjustments on the audio. I replaced some cords and reconnected the cords. So hopefully that little high-pitched, high-frequency buzz is dealt with, because I think I figured out the interference on that. All right, we had some super chats come in over on YouTube. Said from Featuresaurus. Wow, that sounds pretty amazing. Listening to your show whilst washing kegs at work. Great show as always. Well, thank you. Thank you, Featuresaurus. And I hope that your time at work is going by much more enjoyably, that we're able to spend time together washing those kegs away. You're doing good work out there. We need you. Thank you, Featuresaurus. We have STFU FFS says 40-year programmer right here. The inventor at CompuServe called it like GIF. So save your gibberish. Or should gibberish be pronounced like graphics too? Oh, we got deathmatch blowing out. Thank you, STFU FFS. All right, we're going to do one more refresh over on locals, and then we're going to wrap it up for the day. Let's see if there's anything else that came in. We had two come in. Oh, we had a couple come in. Robute says, with Queen Elizabeth passing, I wonder what happens now to Prince Andrew and some of his saga. Jeremy says, being in California, I haven't lost electricity yet, so I can post a comment, which is good. I said, you're only allowed to post a comment on locals today if you have electricity. All right. No comments if you don't have electricity, then there's no way you can comment. And so we don't want your comments, right? Only electrified people can, comment in our internet forum. Jeremy says, I can post because I've got power. Awesome. There has been so much corruption of abuse and power and constitutional trampolines intentional. I really hope all the people who are well and outspoken continue to call out these political atrocities before the abusers of power silence everyone and complete their transformation of our free country to an actual prison. Yeah, just horrendous. It's shocking that this stuff is happening in the United States, especially California, supposedly one of the richest countries or states in the country. Martin says, new background is better. The old background triggered my ADHD and I ended up staring at the background stuff. Yeah, backgrounds are complicated. You don't want them to be too full. Otherwise, people are watching what's going on in the background. There's a lot going on in this background, but it's also sort of blurred out a little bit. So it's got that bokeh effect. So you can't really see like what the book titles are, or you can sort of make, like if you know what the Lego set is, then you know what it is, but you kind of blur it out. It's like, pay attention to me. Otherwise people get distracted. And some people have those really busy backgrounds and they work for them, but we're probably going to keep it the same if I can be perfectly honest about it, because you see those little lights and stuff that are popping out behind there. It's all complicated. Like nothing moves, right? Because there's lights that are like behind this bookshelf. There's a bulb there. So if I move it, I got to redo all the wiring. There's a bulb back there behind the thing. It's, you know how it is. So I'm not going to, very unlikely that I'm going to be fiddling around with more stuff, but I do appreciate the suggestions. And maybe one day something will be upgraded. Eventually we'll stop talking about the January 6th insurrection, and, that will have to go. But they keep talking about it, and, so it's going to stay up there. All right, let's see here. Three Girlies is back. They say, hey, Rob, it's Youngest Girly. I wanted to say thank you for all the happy birthday wishes and the song. I enjoyed dinner and had fun. Can you talk about something that might make sense to me? Well, yeah, that's a good question. I guess I'd have to know about what you're learning in school. So maybe if you have a suggestion about something you're learning in school, maybe a history lesson or, social studies or civics class or something like that. Well, just tell me what topic you're on. What's chapter 8, whatever that chapter is and whatever you're learning. Then yeah, we can work that into the show. No question. That stuff's important, and we could use a refresher on some of those concepts. Definitely. It's a great suggestion, Youngest Girly, and happy birthday. Thank you for taking the time to come back out here and let us know that you had a great birthday and that you enjoyed dinner. Thanks for being here and happy birthday. And so I think that is the best way to end it, my friends. And shout out to the Three Girlies household, Heather and the Youngest Girly. And I think we'll leave it there. Well, Rai T, before we do, said, build the Lego set on the stream. That way the Youngest Girly will be able to make sense of it too. Yeah. You know what I built the other day? I did build a little puzzle. I worked on a puzzle. I had a lot of fun working on a puzzle. It was a scorpion metal puzzle. Maybe I'll show it to you guys. It's a lot of fun. It requires you to get in there and do, it's like a model type of a thing. But it was sort of an enjoyable experience, because I like to sort of disconnect myself from the online world sometimes. And I did that while listening to some audiobook. It's good to do it. All right. So yeah, puzzles are good. Legos are good. All sorts of stuff. Yeah, these little, do you want to see the scorpion? Here, let me get the scorpion. Since we're on it, let me just get the scorpion real fast. Let me show you the scorpion. All right, it's right here. Hang on. All right, so I've got this scorpion here. And yeah, it's a little, well, I'm going to show you the scorpion. Yeah, here it is. So it's right here. It's pretty cool. So you can get these little puzzles and they're full metal. And I don't know if you can see, it's metal. This is a chunky thing. And the whole thing comes deconstructed. And it's got all of these little, I don't know if the camera's going to focus on it very well. But see that? Look at those details. And every one of those screws you have to assemble. And it's 200, 400 pieces or something like that. Every single one of those screws you assemble and it sort of moves around. I mean, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So I had a lot of fun doing that. And I was just listening to an audiobook, unplugging from some of the politics and stuff. And it's fun. It's fun. It sort of requires you to get in there and use your hands and sort of exercise your brain a little bit. And you follow these instructions that are not very clear. And it's kind of a frustrating thing. It's a lot of fun. So you can grab those on Amazon and there's different models and stuff like that. So I started to play around with those. But I think JC says, is it a model? No, it's metal. So I think it's like laser. All of these, they all come on these flat sheets. So it's like a bunch of flat sheets. And then you pop out these metal pieces and then you just assemble them all. And it's pretty heavy. I mean, it's pretty hefty and it's got all these little screws on the bottom. I mean, it's a full thing. It's pretty cool. So anyways, it's something that I was doing and it's fun. Anyways, let's do one final refresh before we wrap it up for the day. We had two. Aggie Martin says, don't worry, Youngest Girly, nothing makes sense to us either. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I can try to make something make sense, but who knows? Probably not going to make a whole lot of sense. STFUFFS says that Lego with a 900-foot Trump like an orange Godzilla. And it looks like Vientikis shared over the... Whoa, what is this? A 3D puzzle. Wow, that's pretty complicated. Thank you, Vientikis. I don't know what that is. This is a puzzle. That's not obviously what I built, but that is pretty cool. Little dino puzzle. All right, my friends, but that is it for us for the day. So I want to, oh no, we had some super chats come in over on locals. Jason on Blast, he says, hey, thanks for all you do and for bringing it almost every day with energy and positivity. Almost, it's true. You are an excellent addition to my life. Well, thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jason. That's a really nice comment. You know, like I say here, I really enjoy our time together. I learn a lot. It is like a flood of information coming from your comments, from your stories. It gets me thinking in a way that I wouldn't do by myself. And I have a ton of fun with you, and I'm getting to know many of you, you know, and so it's really a lot of fun. I'm grateful that you're here. Thank you very much, Jason. John says here for more transcripts. And we also have John saying for the special master fund coming in there. So thank you to John. Thank you to John Allen, John McGarvey, and John Allen, and Jason for those amazing locals donations, or I don't know what they call them over there. Locals tips. Transcripts. What transcripts are we going to have to get into? Probably Bannon, right? Although it's state court, so some of this stuff might be public. You know, the media is going to be filing requests for the media access. And so if the judge grants that, we'll have to take a look and see if we can actually see some proceedings. We'll have to wait and find out. But that, my friends, is in fact it for us for the day. And so I want to thank you for being a part of the show. We will be back here to do it all again tomorrow. Before we get out of here, one final reminder to go on over and check out our community at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We have daily walk and talks over there. We have an amazing community. You just saw people chatting away. They post stories. I try to hop in the comments when I can. And, you know, we try to share stuff. And I actually pull a lot of the things I talk about from the stories that people share. And so come check us out, watchingthewatchers.locals.com, or hit the join button if you want to join on YouTube. You get access to those same walk and talks, which are about 20, 30-minute videos that I try to post at least 6 days a week. You also get access to the GIFs and the GIFs that you can use in the chat. The latest 2 editions were Binger and Hunter. I am, of course, a lawyer over at the R&R Law Group, my law firm in Scottsdale, Arizona. I am forever grateful for all of your referrals. Anytime you think about somebody or hear somebody in trouble with the law in Arizona, that's what we do. We have a lot of fun here on this channel, but every single day we have a whole team of people that help good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope, not only in their cases, but also in their lives. And we're grateful for your referrals. They keep us busy doing the work that we love. Thank you to all the mods who mod down the fort for us. Big thank yous go out to Vienticus. Shout outs to K-Bean, Just Cows, Lean, Playing Hooky, Ronnie Cole, Zulu, of course, Geo, Henry Dixon. Appreciate all of your help modding down the fort, keeping things on track for us. Shout out to our Spotlight supporters, Chris Romero, David B3, Dr. EMB in the house, and John over at qsimple.com, all Spotlight supporters who contribute to the show monetarily to support the work that we do with a little extra oomph, and I'm very grateful for that. I like to share some screen real estate, and so thank you to all, Chris, David, Dr., and John over at QSimple. Please go and support qsimple.com if you can. But that, my friends, is it for us for the day, and I want to thank you for being a part of the program. We are going to be here to do it all again tomorrow, and I hope to see you there so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Down upon our system with the hope so that we can shine the spotlight down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. I'll continue to work on it. I'm a little bit rusty, but we'll get it back into the swing of things. Thanks for all the suggestions. Thanks for the proposals. Thanks for the petitions. We'll continue to work on the show. I'm grateful for you all being here and being a part of it. Have a tremendous evening, my friends. Sleep very well. I'll see you all right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.